Hey, everybody. Welcome to another deep dive. With me today, we're going to be talking about Samuel Little.
Oh, yeah.
Have you heard of him?
Samuel Little, yeah.
He is considered one of the most prolific serial killers in American history.
Wow.
And we're going to try to answer a really tough question. Uh, was Samuel Little's reign of terror a failure of the justice system or a symptom of some, deeper societal issues,
Right, yeah.
So we're going to be looking at excerpts from his Wikipedia page today,
Okay.
which lays out the horrifying details of his crimes, but also hints at maybe some answers to that question.
Yeah, it's a fascinating question.
Yeah.
A really complex one?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you can't look at a case like this without considering both the individual and the systems that allowed him to operate for so long.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So just how prolific was Little? Well, the numbers are staggering.
Okay.
Little confessed to 93 murders,
Wow.
and as of right now, the FBI has confirmed his involvement in at least 60 of them.
And that's just the confirmed cases. It's quite possible, even probable,
Yeah.
that the actual victim count is higher than that.
That's scary.
What's striking is how long he managed to evade capture.
Yeah.
That really speaks to the systemic issues we were talking about.
Right.
How could somebody commit so many horrific acts over such a long period of time?
Okay, so to kind of get a handle on this, let's start at the beginning.
Sure.
Little was born in 1940 and abandoned by his mother.
Oh,
He ended up being raised by his grandmother in Ohio.
right.
Pretty rough start, right?
Yeah.
But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
His Wikipedia page says that Little claimed his fascination with strangulation began in kindergarten.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a detail that definitely jumps out at you.
It's insane.
Now, it's important to note that we're dealing with self-reported information here.
Right.
So, we have to consider the source.
Of course, yeah.
But if true, that early fixation with strangulation raises all sorts of questions about the nature versus nurture debate. Was this a predisposition he was born with, or was it a result of something he experienced?
It's chilling to think about, a foreshadowing of the horrors he would later inflict on people.
Yeah.
And his early life didn't get much better. He got his first conviction at just 16 years old for breaking and entering.
And that was just the tip of the iceberg.
Wow.
From there, he racked up multiple arrests across multiple states.
Really?
We're talking assault, armed robbery,
Oh my gosh.
rape.
Wow.
His criminal record shows a blatant disregard for the law and an escalation toward increasingly violent behavior.
It's like he was on a collision course with destiny, wasn't he?
Yeah, you could say that.
A lot of experts say that this pattern of criminal behavior is like a hallmark of budding serial killers.
Mhm.
Do you think the signs were all there from the start?
It's easy to look back and connect the dots,
Yeah.
but it's much harder to predict these things in real time.
Sure.
Countless people have difficult childhoods and run-ins with the law without becoming serial killers. What sets someone like Little apart is this confluence of factors. A possible biological predisposition,
Mm-hmm.
a traumatic upbringing, escalating criminal behavior,
Right.
and crucially, the opportunities that he had to continue offending.
So you're saying that it's not just about Little himself,
Right.
but also about the failures of the system that allowed him to slip through the cracks time and time again.
Exactly. And that's where this question of whether his crimes were a failure of the justice system or a symptom of deeper societal issues becomes really important.
Okay.
Let's look at 1982, for example.
Okay.
He was arrested in Mississippi for the murder of Melinda Lepre.
So that was like a clear chance to stop him in his tracks.
Right, but a grand jury declined to indict him
Wow.
later that same year.
Oh my gosh.
He was even tried for murdering Patricia Mount in Florida,
Wow.
but was acquitted due to issues with witness testimony.
Wow. So these were major missed opportunities.
Major missed opportunities.
It makes you wonder, what if
Yeah.
what if he had been convicted then? Would so many other lives have been saved?
It's impossible to say for sure, but it's a question worth pondering.
Yeah.
These early failures to hold him accountable undoubtedly allowed Little to continue his spree of violence.
And that violence seemed to escalate even further when he moved to California in the early 80s.
Right.
In 1984, he was convicted of kidnapping and assaulting Lori Burroughs. Thankfully, she survived, but...
But a month later, police found him with another unconscious woman in the same location as the attack on Burroughs.
Oh my God.
She had been beaten and strangled.
Wow.
A clear pattern was emerging.
Yeah.
A pattern of escalating violence and brazen disregard for the law.
And even after serving time for those crimes, it seemed nothing could stop him upon his release. Little's reign of terror truly intensified, especially in Los Angeles.
Yeah, Los Angeles became his hunting ground.
But it would be years before he finally faced justice for the full scope of his crimes. So it's almost unbelievable that it took so long to catch him.
It is.
What finally brought him down?
Well, in a twist of fate, it wasn't a murder charge that finally led to his capture.
Really?
In 2012, Little was arrested on a narcotics charge in Kentucky.
Wait, so a simple drug charge is what stopped this serial killer?
It is, it's more complicated than that.
Okay.
While he was in custody for the drug charge, authorities ran his DNA,
Okay.
and that's when everything changed.
Oh, wow. That must have been the moment that, like, the wall started closing in.
Absolutely.
Wow.
His DNA linked him to 3 unsolved murders from the 1980s in Los Angeles. Cases that had gone cold for decades were suddenly cracked wide open.
Talk about the power of forensic science. It's amazing how, like, a simple DNA sample can connect a killer to his crimes even after all those years.
It really highlights the importance of those databases and the tireless work of investigators who keep pursuing these cases even when all hope seems lost.
Yeah.
And for Little, this was just the beginning of the end.
Okay.
In 2014, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison for those 3 murders.
Life in prison, you'd think that would be the end of the story, right?
Right? You'd think he'd just fade into obscurity, another nameless face behind bars.
Yeah.
But Samuel Little had other plans.
Oh, no. What?
Once incarcerated, he started confessing
Oh,
to a truly
no.
shocking number of additional murders.
Dozens.
Dozen.
Oh, my.
He provided chilling details, specific locations, how he met the victims, even drew portraits of them from memory. It was a deluge of information, and it left investigators scrambling to verify his claims.
I bet they were skeptical at first. I mean, why would a serial killer convicted and serving life suddenly decide to spill his secrets like that?
It's the million-dollar question.
Right.
Some criminologists believe it was a twisted desire for control.
Okay.
He might have felt a sense of power in dictating the narrative, even from behind bars.
Yeah, like he wanted to make sure everyone knew just how prolific he was.
Exactly.
To, like, cement his place in criminal history, even if it was a horrifying one.
Exactly. It's a chilling thought.
It is.
But whatever his motivation, Little's confessions opened up this Pandora's box of unsolved cases across the country. The FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, also known as VICAP, took the lead.
Okay.
They began meticulously cross-referencing his statements with their database of unsolved homicides.
So they were trying to, like, separate fact from fiction.
Right.
To see how many of his confessions actually held up.
Precisely. And the results were astonishing.
Yeah.
The FBI was able to confirm at least 34 of his confessions,
Wow.
which solidified his place as the most prolific serial killer in U.S. history, at least in terms of confirmed victims.
That's a truly staggering number, and to think that there could be even more victims out there, cases that haven't been linked to him yet.
It's a heartbreaking reality, even with Little behind bars. The work continues to identify his victims and bring some measure of closure to their families.
It makes you wonder what kind of person could commit such heinous acts. Like, did he ever express any remorse for what he had done?
That's a complex question.
Yeah.
Little often described his crimes in a very detached, almost matter-of-fact manner.
Oh.
There's very little evidence to suggest he felt any genuine remorse for the pain and suffering he caused.
Wow, it's almost as if he saw his victims as objects, not human beings with lives and loved ones.
That lack of empathy is a common trait among serial killers.
Right.
It allows them to dehumanize their victims, to compartmentalize their actions, and avoid confronting the full weight of their crimes.
Yeah, it's chilling. So we know he targeted vulnerable women, but can you tell us more about them? Like, who were they? What were their lives like?
Sadly, the very nature of their marginalized status makes it difficult to paint a complete picture of their lives.
Right.
Many were struggling with poverty, addiction, or homelessness.
Oh, gosh.
They existed on the fringes of society, their stories often overlooked or forgotten.
It's tragic. It's like they were invisible to so much of the world even before Little entered their lives. Do we know why he specifically targeted these women?
In a disturbingly calculated way,
Hmm.
Little knew that these women were less likely to be reported missing, less likely to have strong social networks that would advocate for them. He saw their vulnerability as an opportunity to get away with murder, literally.
It's horrifying to think that he deliberately targeted them because of their circumstances.
And it speaks volumes about the systemic inequalities that make certain groups more susceptible to violence and exploitation. These women fell through the cracks of society
Yeah.
and tragically into the hands of a predator like Samuel Little.
So we've got this horrific situation where Little was able to exploit vulnerabilities within the system and target individuals who were already marginalized and overlooked. What can we learn from this? What can be done to protect vulnerable populations from predators like Little in the future?
That's a crucial question.
Yeah.
We can't bring back the victims, but we can learn from this tragedy and work to prevent future atrocities.
Okay.
It's a multifaceted issue, but awareness is key.
Okay.
We need to shine a light on the dangers facing these communities, encourage reporting of crimes even when victims might be hesitant or afraid, and ensure that law enforcement agencies are trained to handle cases involving marginalized individuals with sensitivity and expertise.
It's about like building trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve,
Absolutely.
and about recognizing that everyone deserves equal protection under the law, regardless of their social standing.
Absolutely. It's also about addressing the root causes that contribute to vulnerability, poverty, addiction, homelessness, by providing resources and support to those in need.
Right.
We can help create a safety net that prevents people from falling through the cracks and becoming targets for exploitation.
So it's not just about catching the bad guys, but about addressing the underlying issues that make certain groups more vulnerable in the first place.
Exactly. It's about creating a society where everyone feels valued, supported, and protected.
It's a huge task, but one that's worth undertaking. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into the life and crimes of Samuel Little. It's been a heavy conversation, to say the least. But I think it's important to end on a note of hope. Despite the darkness and tragedy, there are still people out there fighting for justice, working to identify his victims, and striving to create a safer world for everyone.
I couldn't agree more. We can't let the scale of Little's crimes overshadow the individual stories of his victims, their lives, their loved ones. Their memories deserve to be honored, and their cases deserve to be pursued with unwavering dedication.
Absolutely. It's about honoring their memory and continuing the fight for justice.
Yeah.
What else can you tell us about how investigators are using Little's confessions and drawings to identify his victims?
One of the most fascinating aspects of this case is the role that Little's drawings have played in helping to identify his victims.
Oh, wow.
He had this peculiar habit of sketching portraits of the women he murdered, sometimes years after the crime.
It's a chilling thought, but I imagine those drawings must be incredibly valuable to investigators.
You're absolutely right. While the drawings themselves are unsettling, they've proven to be a vital tool for law enforcement.
Okay.
Investigators have been able to use them to connect faces to names to put a human story behind the cold case files.
So even in his depravity, Little inadvertently provided a way to bring some measure of closure to the families of his victims.
It's a strange paradox. His desire to document his crimes, perhaps born out of a twisted sense of ego or morbid fascination, has ultimately backfired.
Yeah.
It's helped investigators identify victims who might have otherwise remained nameless and forgotten.
That's a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of cases, there's always hope for truth and accountability.
Absolutely.
But it's not just about solving the crimes, it's about understanding the man behind them. Let's delve a bit deeper into Samuel Little's psychological profile. What do we know about the mind of this monster?
Yeah, it's a question that haunts everyone who learns about this case.
Yeah.
You know, how could someone commit such horrific acts?
It's the question that criminologists and psychologists grapple with all the time, trying to understand like the motivations and the mindset of a serial killer.
Yeah, is there even an answer? Like, can we truly understand what drives someone like Samuel Little?
If there were easy answers, we'd be a lot closer to preventing these tragedies. The truth is, it's complex, a dark puzzle with pieces we may never fully understand.
There's no single explanation for why someone becomes a serial killer. It's often a combination of factors: biological predispositions, psychological trauma, social influences, all interacting in ways that are difficult to disentangle.
So we're talking about a perfect storm of factors converging in one individual.
In a way, yes. But it's important to remember that not everyone who experiences trauma or exhibits certain personality traits becomes a serial killer.
Right.
Countless people face adversity and come out the other side without harming others.
That's a good point. It's not like a simple equation.
Right.
So what do we know specifically about Little's psychological profile? What sets him apart?
Well, based on his behavior and his own statements, some clear patterns emerge: a profound lack of empathy, a chilling disregard for human life, and a disturbing fascination with violence, particularly against women.
And we know that that fascination with strangulation started at an alarmingly young age, according to him, back in kindergarten.
Right, that early fixation is a huge red flag.
Oh.
It suggests a deeply ingrained psychological disturbance, and it's certainly consistent with the trajectory of his life.
It's terrifying to think that those early signs were there potentially overlooked or dismissed.
Hindsight is always 20/20. It's much easier to connect the dots looking back than it is to predict future behavior, especially with something as complex as serial homicide.
Absolutely. We've also talked about Little's confessions and the fact that he drew portraits of his victims. What can you tell us about those drawings? Like, what purpose did they serve?
That's a fascinating aspect of this case. It seems so counterintuitive that a serial killer would create such detailed records of his crimes.
Yeah, you'd think he'd want to keep them hidden, bury those memories deep.
You'd think so, but remember, we're dealing with a mind that operates outside the norms of conventional morality.
Right.
Some experts believe the drawings were Little's way of holding on to his work, of preserving a twisted legacy. He may have derived a sixth sense of satisfaction from documenting his atrocities.
Yeah, it's like he wanted to ensure that his crimes wouldn't be forgotten, even if he was caught.
Exactly, and in a way, he succeeded. Those drawings, as disturbing as they are, have become a crucial part of the investigation. They've helped investigators identify victims who might have otherwise remained nameless.
So, his attempt to control the narrative to claim ownership of these horrific acts ironically led to the identification of more victims and a fuller understanding of the scope of his crimes.
It's a strange twist of fate, his own dark legacy turned against him. And it underscores an important point. Even the most cunning criminals can be brought to justice, and sometimes their own actions inadvertently contribute to their downfall.
It's a glimmer of hope in an otherwise incredibly dark story. So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the life and crimes of Samuel Little, what are the key takeaways you want our listeners to remember?
Samuel Little's case is a stark reminder of the darkness that exists in the world, but it's also a call to action.
Yeah.
We can't ignore the vulnerabilities that exist in our society. We can't turn a blind eye to those who are suffering. We all have a role to play in creating a safer and more just world.
What can we do? Where do we even begin?
It starts with empathy, with recognizing the humanity in everyone, regardless of their circumstances. It means speaking out against injustice whenever we see it. It means supporting organizations that work to combat poverty, addiction, and homelessness, the very factors that can make individuals vulnerable to exploitation.
Yeah, it's a reminder that we're all connected and that the well-being of one affects us all.
Exactly. Samuel Little may be gone, but the fight for justice, the fight for a safer world continues.
That's a powerful message to end on. We hope this deep dive has been informative, thought-provoking, and perhaps even a catalyst for action. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's been a privilege to share these insights with you.
And to you, our listener, we leave you with this final thought. What can each of us do in our own way to create a world where the victims of Samuel Little and countless others like them are never forgotten?